She was not the most powerful ruler in the world. She did not command Rome's legions. She did not own the roads, the armies, or the empire that was slowly swallowing the Mediterranean. But for years, Cleopatra made Rome look toward Egypt, not as a prize, not as a weak kingdom waiting to be taken, but as a threat. Rome would later try to remember her as a seductress, a dangerous woman who destroyed great men with beauty and charm. But that was the easy story, the story Rome wanted to survive. The real Cleopatra was far more dangerous. She was a queen born into a collapsing dynasty, ruling a kingdom trapped between ancient glory and Roman ambition. She understood language, politics, image, wealth, and survival. And when the strongest power in the world finally came to claim her, Cleopatra made one final decision. Rome could take Egypt, but it would not take her alive. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, the glittering capital of Egypt. But she was not born into a peaceful royal family. She came from the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek Macedonian family that had ruled Egypt since the age of Alexander the Great. For centuries, they wore the crown of the pharaohs. But by Cleopatra's time, the crown was heavy with weakness. Egypt was rich, but surrounded by danger. Its fields fed nations. Its ports controlled trade. Its wealth attracted Rome. And Rome did not look at wealthy kingdoms with friendship. It looked at them with hunger. Cleopatra grew up understanding one truth. A throne is never simply inherited. It must be defended. When Cleopatra's father died in 51 BCE, she became queen alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. She was about 18. He was still a boy. But in the palace, age did not matter. Power did. The royal court was full of advisors, generals, servants, priests, and ambitious men who wanted to control the throne through her brother. Cleopatra tried to rule as more than a symbol. That made her dangerous. Soon, the palace turned against her. Her brother's faction pushed her out of power, and Cleopatra was forced to flee Egypt. For many rulers, exile is the end. For Cleopatra, it became preparation. She waited. She watched. And she looked for the one force strong enough to return her to the throne. Rome. At the same time, Rome was tearing itself apart. Julius Caesar and Pompey were fighting for control of the Roman world. Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping to find protection. Instead, he was murdered. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria, he found a kingdom already divided by civil war. Cleopatra understood the moment immediately. Caesar was not just a Roman general. He was the power that could decide Egypt's future. The famous story says Cleopatra was secretly carried into Caesar's presence, hidden inside bedding or a carpet. Whether every detail is perfect history or polished legend, the message is clear. Cleopatra knew how to make an entrance. She did not come before Caesar as a helpless exile. She came as a queen who understood theater, danger, and timing. Caesar saw her intelligence. Cleopatra saw her chance. Caesar supported Cleopatra. That support changed everything. War broke out in Alexandria between Caesar's forces and the faction of Ptolemy XIII. The palace became a battlefield. The city burned with confusion. And in the end, Cleopatra's brother lost. Ptolemy XIII died while fleeing, and Cleopatra returned to the throne. But she had not simply won her crown back. She had tied Egypt's future to Rome. Soon after, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. To Cleopatra, the child was more than a prince. He was a symbol, a possible bridge between Egypt and the Roman world. But symbols are dangerous, especially in Rome. Cleopatra later went to Rome and lived near Caesar. To many Romans, her presence was disturbing. She was a foreign queen, a monarch, a woman with wealth, influence, and a child connected to Caesar's name. Rome had expelled its kings long ago. It hated the idea of monarchy. And now Caesar stood above the Republic like a man too powerful to remain ordinary. Then, in 44 BCE, Caesar was assassinated. The knives that killed him also destroyed Cleopatra's plan. Without Caesar, her protection was gone. Her position in Rome became dangerous, so Cleopatra returned to Egypt. She had survived exile. She had survived palace betrayal. She had survived one Roman civil war. But another was coming. And this time, the man who would enter her life was Mark Antony. After Caesar's death, Roman power was divided. One of the most powerful men was Mark Antony, soldier, politician, and former ally of Caesar. Antony controlled Rome's eastern territories. That made Cleopatra impossible to ignore. He summoned her to meet him at Tarsus. But Cleopatra did not arrive like a servant answering an order. She arrived like a goddess. Ancient writers describe her sailing on a magnificent barge, surrounded by perfume, music, purple sails, gold, and spectacle. It was not just beauty, it was politics. Cleopatra was sending a message before she even spoke. I am not a frightened client, Queen. I am Egypt. Antony was captivated, but their alliance was not only romance. Cleopatra needed protection. Antony needed money, ships, grain, and the wealth of Egypt. Together they became powerful. Together they became dangerous. For a time, Cleopatra and Antony built something that looked almost unstoppable. They had children together. They ruled from Alexandria with wealth and ceremony. Antony granted lands and titles to Cleopatra and their children. Caesarion was presented as Caesar's true son. To Cleopatra, this was the dream. Egypt restored, her dynasty secured, her children placed among kings. But in Rome, Octavian was watching. Octavian was Caesar's adopted heir. He was young, controlled, patient, and ruthless in a quieter way than Antony. He understood something Antony underestimated. Wars are not won only with armies. They are won with stories. And Octavian began to tell Rome a story. Octavian painted Antony as a Roman hero corrupted by an Eastern queen. He made Cleopatra the villain, not a ruler defending her kingdom, not a politician protecting her dynasty, but a foreign seductress who had bewitched Antony and threatened Rome. It was propaganda. But propaganda does not need to be honest. It only needs to be useful. Rome began to see Cleopatra not as a queen, but as a danger. A woman who wanted power. A woman who had taken one Roman man after another. A woman who stood too close to the heart of Roman politics. Octavian knew exactly what he was doing. He was not only preparing Rome for war against Antony, he was preparing Rome for war against Cleopatra. In 31 BCE, the conflict reached its breaking point. Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian near Actium, off the western coast of Greece. Their forces were powerful, but their position was weakening. Octavian's admiral, Agrippa, cut supply lines and tightened the trap. Then, on September 2nd, the fleets met. The battle was not only a fight between ships, it was a fight for the future of the Mediterranean. At some point, Cleopatra's ships broke away. Antony followed her. Ancient writers made this look like panic, weakness, or betrayal. The truth may have been more complicated. It may have been an escape from a battle already slipping away. But the result was clear. Actium was lost. And once Actium was lost, Octavian became almost impossible to stop. The next year, Octavian came to Egypt. Alexandria, the city of libraries, temples, palaces, and royal dreams, waited for the Roman machine to arrive. Antony's power collapsed. His allies disappeared. His soldiers lost faith. Believing Cleopatra was dead, Antony took his own life. But Cleopatra was still alive. And now she faced Octavian. This was her final battle. Not with armies, not with ships, with image. Octavian wanted her alive, not because he was merciful, because he wanted to parade her through Rome in chains. He wanted Cleopatra as a trophy, proof that Egypt had fallen, proof that the queen who stood beside Caesar and Antony had finally been broken. Cleopatra understood exactly what Octavian wanted. If she lived, Rome would write her ending in front of cheering crowds. She would not be remembered as a queen. She would be displayed as a conquered woman. So Cleopatra made her final choice. In 30 BCE, at the age of 39, she died in Alexandria. The famous story says she died from the bite of an asp, a sacred serpent of Egypt. Maybe that is true. Maybe it was poison. Maybe the details were shaped by legend. But the meaning is what survived. Cleopatra chose death over humiliation. She denied Rome its final performance. Rome could take her palace. Rome could take her gold. Rome could take her kingdom. But it could not take her into the streets as a prisoner. After Cleopatra's death, Egypt became a Roman province. The age of the pharaohs was over. The Ptolemaic dynasty was finished. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Rome won. But Rome did not fully control the memory of Cleopatra, because more than 2,000 years later, her name still survives, not only as a lover of Caesar, not only as the woman Antony died for, but as the last queen of Egypt, a ruler trapped between an ancient kingdom and a rising empire, a woman who fought with intelligence, image, wealth, language, and will. Cleopatra lost the war. She lost Egypt. But she escaped Rome's cage. And in the end, when the greatest power in the world came to claim her, Cleopatra chose the one throne Rome could never reach: legend.